Men who instinctively take personal responsibility for themselves and their families eventually realize that being atomized, rootless cosmopolitans inhibits their ability to exercise their willpower. Male agency naturally leads into the creation of a patriarchy. Raise your sons to be strong, masculine, and dominant. Raise your daughters to be soft, feminine, and submissive. The bad behavior that we see from women today is simply a rebellion against men's failure to benevolently dominate. The failure of Western society is a failure to maintain the patriarchy.
But we're bringing it back. It's episode 19 of Patriarch Hour. I'm James Fox-Higgins, and I'm joined as ever by Noah Revoy. How are you, Noah?
I'm doing great. It's going to be another gold episode, I'm sure.
Yes, more hot, juicy, spicy stuff. Important stuff too. Very important for the future of all mankind, I believe. And some questions get raised to us when we talk about the patriarchy. One of the concerns raised by men is that maybe the patriarchy is going to be all work and no fun, no benefits. It's just going to be a slaving away like Sisyphus for no actual gain. And so that's the area we're looking at tonight. And why don't you tell us about what people have raised with you, Noah, and we can take it from there.
Yeah, so, a lot of what we talk about when we're talking about patriarchy is how it affects women. So how the patriarchy sets boundaries for women, protects women, provides for women. And there's not a lot of talking about how the patriarchy affects men. And this is because the dominant narrative about the patriarchy is written by feminists. Even the language that's used, how it's described, the idea in public opinion, it's not the idea our great-great-grandfathers would have had of patriarchy. It's the idea that was created since feminism became a force, mostly post-Second World War. And that is how people are perceiving patriarchy. And so there are some misconceptions. And there is also not just misconceptions about patriarchy, but about the role of men in society and about what it means to be a man. And all of this has been distorted. It makes sense if you want to control people and you can control the language. Those who have sought to undermine Western society have put a lot of effort into being the ones controlling language. They infiltrated the academy, the universities, and from there, they have influenced how we describe things. And when they control language, they control thoughts and they control actions. And even, we just saw a recent example of this with the concept of sexual preference being turned from a normal thing. And in about 24 hours, the whole process went through from a bunch of radical activists saying there's no such a thing, all the way through to getting backed up by the academy, to it actually getting changed in the online dictionaries.
Did that happen? Wow,
yeah,
that's unbelievable. And all of it is really an exercise or a demonstration of their insistence that we have no agency and we can't have agency, that we can't choose, that we just are what we are, we're born this way, and we have no ability to transform ourselves or improve ourselves or make any choices that are rational or decide what's actually good for us or not. We're just slaves to our impulses and we're born that way. And that's not a world that I want to live in, frankly.
No, and I can almost understand them perceiving it that way, because many of them have no agency. They've chosen not to develop agency. It's like athletic ability. Some of us are gifted with the ability to go farther in athletic ability development, or musical ability, for example. But anyone can learn to run. Anyone can have some basic athletic ability. Anyone can learn to play a musical instrument. You might not be really good at it, but you can learn the basics. And agency is very much the same, but they want to pretend that it is impossible for anyone to have a preference, essentially. Now the concept of preferences has become offensive. It's actually what it says in the dictionary now. The concept of preference when it comes to sexual orientation is offensive. I was born the way I am, and I can't possibly have preferred that way. It was forced upon me by my genetics. Now,
it sort of strikes me as being like the real rape culture in a sense too, to force people into a box, particularly around their sexuality, to say, this is how you've been behaving for however much time, and you can't change your mind. You can't decide that that's not good for you anymore, even if it's leading you down a dark path. And I mean, it's a similar conversation to all of the controversy around what they call conversion therapy in Christianity. No one in Christianity calls it that. That's another label that they've made up to make it sound terrifying. But really what it is that there are people within Christianity who have a proclivity towards same-sex attraction, and they don't want it. They feel it. The desire is there for whatever reason, but they don't want it, and they want help. And they go to their spiritual leaders, they go to their pastors and their counselors at the church, and they want help to modify their behavior and apply their agency to change their preferences and modify who they are. And I mean, this is really what the gift of our life is that we are not given a blank canvas, but we are given a canvas that we can continue to paint upon and improve who we are by taking actions repetitively and reprogramming ourselves and applying our agency towards the kind of change that we know would benefit us and the people that we love. But all of that's out the window if we deny preference, and if we deny choice, and if we just say we're always going to be the way we were born.
Absolutely. And it is an effort to not just take away people's agency, but I believe very strongly that they're attempting to make excuses for their own behavior, so that, you know, we already have under the law, we understand that if a person is mentally diseased, that they have less culpability for committing a crime. And I believe very strongly that they're trying to lay a legalistic framework right in the minds of the population to excuse behavior that goes far beyond simply them choosing to have sex with someone else. I think it's abusive behavior that they're trying to lay out an excuse for, and they're trying to give themselves legal cover. And I think this will come out more and more over the next few months. They've been working for a long time to normalize, not just legalize, but normalize things like pedophilia and incest and this type of things. And these are the kind of things that a patriarchy would prevent from happening. They would not allow, you know, a patriarchy protects women and children. If it doesn't protect them, it's not a patriarchy. You can have rule by men that isn't patriarchy. It is simply a dictatorship. But if it's protecting women and children, then it's a patriarchy, because you, as patriarchy coming from the word father, you know, the rule of fathers, and to be a father, you must love and protect your children. If you don't, you might be biologically a father, but you're not living up to the role that it means to be a father. Yes, you've abdicated. Yeah, it is important to understand, though, that a lot of the language, even of those who are anti-feminist, a lot of their thinking about patriarchy was gifted to them by feminists, and they need to expunge those ideas from their head in order to properly look at and evaluate what it would be like to live under a patriarchy. One of the biggest complaints that I get from men is that a patriarchy imposes other people's morals on men. And what they don't like is that, you know, they feel feminists have been imposing their moral framework on men, and they don't want now some other group imposing it as well. So usually the argument goes something along the lines of, men are naturally promiscuous, therefore it's normal for them to want to sleep with a lot of women, but a patriarchy will restrict that promiscuity, and that there is no right, that, you know, patriarchy has no right to do that because it's private behavior.
Sounds like you've been talking to libertarians, Noah.
Yes, actually, it does tend to come from libertarians, and I don't know that there's very many actual libertarians left anymore. Many people are, even if they still believe in a lot of the ideas of libertarianism, they're embarrassed to be associated with it because of all of these. You know, they're the epitome of the slippery slope, and they're almost at the bottom of the slope now. But the real answer to that is that patriarchy doesn't impose other people's morals on you. It imposes reciprocity. And it imposes it on both men and women. Personal choices have public consequences. And when they have public consequences, we have a right to seek redress for the costs that are imposed upon us as a society. If you are having children you can't take care of, with women you're not willing to commit to, you are imposing a cost on society. We either are going to have to, you know, we're either going to let them starve to death, or we're going to feed them. But either way, it's going to be our cost. If we let them starve to death, it will be our cost on our conscience. If we feed them, it'll be a cost in our pocketbook, which means less children for us. And even if we do feed them and they grow up and, you know, they have some place in society, they'll grow up without the benefit of a father, which means they're going to end up, you know, not being a good fit for a patriarchal society, and they may even try to undermine it. And that's what we see right now, is it's mostly fatherless mothers, or fatherless women and fatherless men who are undermining Western civilization. So we have a right to impose certain limits on behavior when that behavior imposes costs on society.
But I think one of the other great tricks that they've played on us is to reduce our time preference, or our time horizons and our perceptions of, you know, the consequences of our choices. So people quite earnestly, I think, believe that their life simply belongs to them, and that the actions that they take may have consequences for them, but it's nobody else's business. And what you're indicating here is a difference in time preference, where we say, well, actually, your choices will, in the time that you're alive, they will ripple out and affect others in ways that you can't necessarily account for. But beyond that, across multiple generations, certain behaviors degenerate the quality of our society, degenerate the quality of our people, and actually become a cost on the commons, which are our shared properties, which include our gene pool, our culture, our public spaces, and how people behave in them. All of these things are our shared properties as members of a society. And if you're making choices now that smarter and wiser men have the perception to see that a few generations down the line is going to degenerate our culture and our society, then we have a moral right to intercede now and prevent you from doing that. So it's not simply an arbitrary morality that's being applied within the patriarchal model. It's actually natural law being enacted, and men who are perceptive enough, usually because they're historically literate enough, to understand the way that behaviors roll out over time and the way that the cycles of behavior affect us historically in different societies. So we're simply seeing a bigger picture than they're able to see. And I think that's part of how they've enslaved us, really, is to get us to live this sort of moment by moment lifestyle. And it's hedonistic, to live for the moment, to live for the pleasure of the moment, live for the now. A lot of that teaching is what has corrupted our society and made us rife and vulnerable to these kinds of cultural attacks, even though they don't seem necessarily bad. Just let people be, right? Live and let live seems like a good idea until you start to think about the longer term consequences.
And very often the consequences don't happen in the same generation where the negative behavior begins. There is a book, an excellent book, that I suggest anyone who's really interested in understanding the impact of sex and culture on history and the development of civilization, is to read a book called Sex and Culture by Unwin. And in there he explains that any civilization that was to restrict drastically sexual conduct, that means ideally no sex before marriage, no sex outside of marriage, and only marriage for people who have reached an age of majority and adulthood, which will vary in different times in history. But those cultures within 3 generations had achieved a level of immense growth and development, and they start to really flourish within 3 generations. And any culture which removed those restrictions, and he goes through different levels of how it was removed, it tends to be a slippery slope. Perhaps it starts with, you know, some sex before marriage, and then sex outside of marriage, and eventually marriage itself stops having anything to do with sex, and it completely breaks down. Those societies within 3 generations decayed. Now, this doesn't mean that the society ended, but it stopped developing. And once it stops developing, it's only a matter of time before a neighboring society will elevate itself sufficiently, a neighboring society which, by the way, has a patriarchy deeply restricting the sexual behavior of its people, will ascend sufficiently that they crush the stagnant society. And this has repeated itself over and over again throughout history. He looks at dozens of examples of this. It is sexual energy is the creative life force, life-giving energy of a society. And when it is wasted in unwholesome or unhealthy ways, it's not being used for the development of science and culture and music and art and the development of people. And so we have a limited amount of this kind of energy, and we have to direct it in the way that is most productive. And a lot of this has to do with with how we raise our children as well, and children that are raised in a wholesome, sexually repressed civilization that is frank and honest about sex, but doesn't, for example, believe that it's okay for children to have sex, as modern society is trying to push on us right now. These children grow up safe. They grow up safe from predators, safe from unhealthy explorations at a very young age. And so they grow up with careful understanding of what the boundaries are. It's very easy for them then to make decisions that are healthy for them. Sorry, could you put that quote back?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I can do whatever I want. Yeah. They don't hurt anyone else. And the reason is as you mentioned, they have this very short time preference.
So just for the podcast listeners, it says, I can do whatever I want as long as I don't hurt anyone else. Next minute, destroys family stability and social cohesion. That's from JDK52. Thanks, brother. That's a great comment. Really hits the nail on the head.
That's exactly what it is. And it's like this. Let's put it in cake terms. So they eat a cake, they feel sick, but they're like, no, I didn't make anyone else feel sick. I didn't make anyone else eat the cake. Their limit is 5 minutes from they did the act. Nothing bad happened.
So
might
as well do it tomorrow, right? Might as well just have another cake.
Yeah, might as well have another cake and another cake.
I mean, it did. I mean, I felt a little queasy, but no harm, no foul. Might as well have a cake every day.
And what's interesting
seems to be a problem.
And what's interesting is the damage that one individual does to society is diluted by the general strength of society.
Yeah.
But imagine if every man in a culture, every man in a nation was to let himself go physically, was to become weak and soft and effeminate, maybe fat, because he's eating too many cakes, or maybe just weak. How long would that civilization survive? History tells us no more than 3 generations. It's been about 2 generations that we've allowed Western men in the majority to become weak and soft and pathetic and effeminate.
Yeah, and we look at those among us who haven't gone down that path, the men who spend their time in the gym or who are professional athletes, and they're either seen as this other class, like this sort of superhuman class, and especially in terms of the professional athletes. But the guys who just make a lifestyle of being fit and healthy and jacked that you see at the gym, are often ridiculed and belittled culturally, or called meatheads, or their value is reduced. And I was exposed to a lot of this sort of this idea growing up. Hearing, even though it was apparent to me that the girls liked the guys with muscles more, yet there was still this cultural normalization of physical laziness and the sort of flabby, inert body being perfectly okay. You just are who you are. Hey, you were born that way, so don't worry about it. It's the same principle being applied, that if we're not using,
they're kind of right. They're kind of right. You're kind of right. You are born weak. You are born weak. You're not supposed to stay how you were born. You're supposed to improve upon yourself. Saying you're born that way and you can't change is pathetic.
It's the admission of the non-player character as well.
Exactly.
I was programmed this way. The programmer made me. I'm not a person. I don't get to choose. I'm just what the programmer made me. I'm an NPC. And most of us are not. Too many of us are. But even that can change. That is the program, actually. The attitude that I can't change or improve is a newly introduced toxic external program installed in the minds of men that is actually not in our nature. We weren't born with that program. We were given that evil program. The program we're born with is that we do stuff and we get better at it when we repeat it. We fail and we learn. We lift heavy things, we get stronger. This is how God made us. This is the real program. But this toxic program of I was born that way and I can't change, that is a weapon that has been used against us.
And it's interesting. I was at the park with my son a couple of days ago, And the boys, everything's relatively peaceful until my son and I come. And the first thing he does is start a big fight. And it's a friendly fight, he says, gets a few of the little boys together that he kind of knows because he sees them often at the park, and says, hey, let's go chase my dad. And so then we start, them trying to take me down like I'm a buffalo or something, and they're all jumping on me at the same time. And they have a lot of fun doing this. And, at a certain point, I take just a break for a moment, and one of the mothers is talking to me, and she says, I don't understand why boys are so interested in violence. They want to fight all the time, and they like swords and guns, and it's, oh, guns, she says, she shudders. And I said, well, it's your reaction, I said, is normal because you're a woman, and that's the reaction a woman should have to violence, because women need to be soft and gentle and tender with their children. But for men, for young boys, they know that is something they're born with. They know that they're going to have the job of protecting society one day, and it's completely unfair, because they might have to go out and die for people they don't know in their civilization, in their nation. They might have to go out and risk their lives. They might have to, if there's a bump in the night, they're the ones that go downstairs to meet that bump in the night. It's not the wife, it's not the children. And that is unfair. And that's one of the things that men are often telling me, is that, oh, it's unfair to put the burden of maintaining society on men, because, women, they get it easy. They get all the protection, they get taken care of. And essentially these men are promoting the idea of we should have an equal society where men and women have equal responsibilities.
Well, see, I don't understand this, because I know as the man of my house that when there's a bump in the night, my instinct is very strong to take action. And to ensure that my wife does not have to take action. And it would feel like a great shame to me if she was getting up out of bed to check the bump in the night. It's not in her nature to do it. It is in my nature to do it. I'm better suited to the job. And so for these men who don't want to have that responsibility unfairly put upon them as they feel, what's the alternative? It basically means men who aren't in the family, because if we're not protecting our own home and hearth and our own neighborhood as men, then we're just outsourcing to other men who we don't know and we don't necessarily trust, the state. And, that's the mess we're in now in Western civilization. But, I don't really see women ever naturally stepping into that role, and I don't believe they should.
It's extremely harmful for women to be under the long term. Men do well under threat. When we're under threat, when we're under stress, you see this. You see a guy goes into prison, skinny, comes out jacked, and he's under this threat that he needs to defend himself and protect himself, and that he needs to level up so that he's accepted by a group of men who can help him protect himself. And so what does he do? He gets fit, right? Well,
and by the way, we're all in the COVID prison now.
Yes,
so
I was going to say
what are we going to do?
We're
let's
all
get
under
jacked.
prison rules currently. We're under prison rules currently, which means you find your tribe, you get jacked, and you protect each other. And for men, that's normal. For women, the high, it is unfair. We do die early because of the stress that it takes to be a man. The constant competition, even though it's good for us when we're younger, it does probably shave 4 or 5 years off our life. And probably it's what makes the difference between men and women's average age of death. So it does have a cost to us. Fortunately, that cost is on the end of our life, not in the middle. And the men who embrace that competition, I think probably it impacts them negatively a lot less. But it is unfair. And, I always tell my son, life is unfair. As much as possible, make sure it's unfair in your favor.
Yeah, just win.
Yes. So if the patriarchy puts very high expectations on men, a lot of women complain about how much they are expected to do under a patriarchy, but men have a lot more expected of them under a patriarchy. They have a lot.
Women have been dragged into a lot more expectations under the feminarchy.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
The bit of truth. Is now they have to raise a family and work, and all the and now they have to manage their own finances, and they have all of these other things that used to be a natural division of labor between the parents and the children, and then the husband and the wife. Now in this great equal society that we've tried to artificially build, women are worse off and unhappy and unfulfilled, and marriages are failing because there's too much being put on their table. So yeah, I would rather take more of the burden on so that they can relax and rest in our protection.
And you know that I often notice that amongst happily married men, the concepts of patriarchy seem very obvious. The willingness to take on these responsibilities doesn't seem like a burden to us.
No.
It's almost always the men who don't have a woman or don't have a chance of getting a woman, or the only kind of women they attract are not worth protecting. Not all women are worth protecting, just like not all men qualify to be in the mature men that would make up a patriarchy. There are men and women who just aren't worth it. There are people who aren't worth our time and attention. That's natural. Otherwise, that's why we pick one woman to marry, or women pick one man to marry. That's the person who gets their attention. But there are a lot of people that aren't worth their attention. If that's the kind of people who are around you, I can understand men saying, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. It's not worth the effort that I have to put in to take care of this woman when she's not of quality. Well, the key to that is to become the kind of man that can attract a woman that's worth providing for and protecting. And as well is to start rejecting any attention to the lower quality women. There's Twitter's flooded right now with women who are like a 4 who are making money on OnlyFans and just bought a new house with it.
Although I wonder about that. I think there might be a little bit of propaganda going on in there. I think they might actually just be pushing the meme to draw more girls into the web. And I think there'd be a lot of girls out there who are prostituting themselves and not really making much coin out of it. Especially, and in their case, I would absolutely say that the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Mm-hmm.
And if some of them are striking gold and getting rich from it, I'd say they are a tiny minority of the 8s or 9s or 10s. But none of them should be there.
All prostitution starts out that the prostitute is novel. They're new. They're something new. And so they get some attention in the beginning. And then there's an overabundance of cheap sleuths, There's an overabundance of feminine sexuality. And the cost or the value of it is decreasing because the abundance of it does not match the market for it. And so what happens is, in order for women to continue to get the attention they may have got during their first they bought a house on a loan, obviously, they're not paying for it cash. They bought a house on a loan, they get some attention for the first month or 2, and then the attention starts to drop. So they need to do something more shocking to bring people in. And then something more shocking. Yeah. And before you know it, what they're doing is worse than any other kind of pornography that you can think of, because they've gotten into this incrementally. And no one step seemed like it was too far. But if the initial them had seen what they'd be doing in a year from now, and it's usually a pretty short cycle, they'd be shocked. As a young man, I grew up ministering to street people. So as a minister, I was mostly preaching to street people. I would say about half of my ministry was to them. That included prostitutes and beggars and drug addicts and alcoholics. One thing that I noticed is there were alcoholics who were there the entire time that I was there, and they didn't look that much different from the beginning to the end. Drug addicts would last about 3 or 4 years. Prostitutes would last about 2 years. Girls coming in roughly my age, I was late teens at the time, come in roughly my age into prostitution. 2 or 3 years later, they look like they were my grandma practically. They were so just crypt keeperish. They would fall apart. Their hair went white. They were in terrible condition. And that was the end of them. Like, they probably killed themselves or something, because they just disappear. And I don't think they suddenly reformed. It's highly unlikely. And these women never had any money. Money that's earned through sex rarely ever sticks with these women. They usually end up spending it on stupid things, because the ease with which they got it makes them not appreciate it. And they feel, most of these women also don't understand the wall. And the wall for a sex worker is like 2 or 3 years from now. It's not when they're 30 or something like that, because they fall apart so fast. Under a patriarchy, this type of situation wouldn't happen to women. They wouldn't get sucked into this. And even though it seems like
we would be taking the predatory men who make it an industry and who parasite off the precious sexuality of these women, the pornographers and the pimps, we would be taking these men out of town and making sure that they're never seen in town again. This is what a patriarchy is for. And you remove that protection for women, and this is what you end up with. And we're seeing it now. Where, as you pointed out, we're only seeing the beginning of that 2-3 year cycle for a lot of these girls. It's only really been in the last year or so that this OnlyFans thing has exploded, and prostitution has become utterly normalized in the way that it has. So we're going to see a lot of tragedy in the years ahead for these girls.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, with the ideas about patriarchy being unfair to men because of the burden it puts on us, it is a big burden for us to be the ones that must exercise self-control and self-restraint and must look ahead to the future. Not every man is going to be expected to be part of the patriarchy. Not every man is going to be expected to be a mature adult man. There are some people that will never grow up. And under a patriarchy, you're not going to have a burden put upon you that you can't handle. You're not going to have a burden put upon you that you don't voluntarily take on. Limits and boundaries will be put upon you as long as you want to stay in society. You can always leave. But as long as you stay part of society, you can take on the burden that you feel comfortable with. And the idea of it being unfair for men, the men who are choosing those burdens are doing it and they don't feel it's unfair.
And we
Otherwise,
get the benefits of it.
Yes.
We reap the rewards of the strain. We pick up the heavy load and we gain the muscle for it. And for those who can't, that's fine, but don't expect an equal ride.
Yes. And that's the thing, is in a patriarchal society, it is the men who do the work of enforcing society's boundaries, protecting society. And when I say enforcing boundaries, I don't just mean enforcing rules upon those who live in the patriarchy, but enforcing boundaries to the outer world as well, preventing the external world from negatively influencing the community. And this job is a difficult job, of course, but it's a job that men voluntarily take on. And part of the reciprocity of that is that they're also the ones that get to decide what the future of that community is. Any man can join that group, but he needs to show that he's capable of being part of the patriarchy by being mature. So, one of the others that I often hear is that patriarchy forces men to get married. What I think, at first I thought this was, I couldn't understand this, because I'm thinking, I know in the Middle Ages, about a third of men didn't marry. They would go to the church, they would go to work in the government, they would go to work in the military, and they were men who just for one reason or another chose not to get married. Some of these men could have if that was the life choice they made, but they didn't. And I
suppose there's always been a class of men who don't have the choice, who just get rotten luck, rotten genes. They're just born, at the wrong time and place, and they're on the bottom of the totem pole as far as sexual choice goes.
And actually, some of these men have been the key to Western civilization's rapid growth in science and technology. So Sir Isaac Newton was probably not a man that should have gotten married and had kids. The contribution that he created for society was enormous by being a single eccentric who stayed at home all the time and did nothing but think. And in that way, you could say that's maybe there are some men in this position who provide nothing, but if you look at most of the great names in science in European history, and that basically is the history of science, you will find that a large portion of them never had children.
And likewise for the theologians of the church who rapidly developed our understanding and relationship with God as a church. And Nikola Tesla famously said that he didn't believe that any inventor should burden himself with marriage, because he knew his own temperament, and that the passions that he was able to pour into his work would most certainly be poured into a woman, with infatuation and absolute passionate love. He would give that to the woman in his life, and he knew that would be at a loss to the world and to his work, because he needed to have that, as you said, that life-creating sexual energy needed to be channeled into something other than family for men like him, and we're better for it. We're richer for it. So there is certainly a place for the childless, wifeless man in the world, if he has somewhere to direct those energies.
Absolutely. And, as long as the man is not imposing a burden on society or the woman, they can choose a path that they want. The patriarchy does not, this is not the feminist idea of a patriarchy where the woman is forced to be a breeding machine, like the Handmaid's Tale book, which it's interesting because that's written by a feminist.
Do you ever watch that James Bond movie Moonraker, where they sort of do a parody of the Nazi eugenics program, where they've got all these beautiful blonde men and blonde women, and they're all put into a shuttle and sent off to the moon to breed, and it's it's a parody, but it's this idea that we're going to be ushering people around at gunpoint and forcing them to marry and have children. That's a fictional patriarchy.
Yes. We only want people to have children who really want children, because those are going to be the only people that raise them well. And Dr. Edward Dutton explains that part of wanting children is actually genetic. There is genetic markers that indicate or that increase a person's desire to want children, and those are connected with personality traits. And those personality traits are all what you would call pro-social personality traits, such as higher conscientiousness, more agreeableness, this kind of thing. And so by allowing only those who want to have children, we're actually creating a better society, a society that gets along better with its members, and a society where children are raised in an environment where they're wanted rather than an environment where they're forced. This is an idea that I have seen on the right side as well that's incorrect about patriarchy, is that women need to be forced into a certain mode of behavior, and that they need to be forced to have children. And I do agree there needs to be encouragement. The truth needs to be told to women about how much they're going to enjoy having kids, and how this, for 99% of women, is the life that's going to be best for them. However, if you force someone to do something and that person isn't able to physically not do, prevent you from doing that, they might have to go along with it at first. And this has happened throughout history. The warlord captures the neighboring village, forces the women to sleep with him. Well, you know what happens? One of those women decides in the night while he's sleeping to take his dagger and plunge it in his neck.
Yep,
or they take it out on his children. They take it out on his children because they disassociate.
People often misunderstand, I think, one of the basic tenets of the rule of law, especially under what we envisage as a righteous patriarchy. It's not about via positiva law. It's not about forcing people to do certain things. It's not about what you must do. It's about what we won't allow to happen. It's the via negativa law, is the ideal way to manage a society. Here are the boundaries. You don't cross these, because we know that will degenerate and harm our society. It'll harm our children. It'll harm our women. So we won't allow you to do that. That's the via negativa line there. But within those boundaries, you choose. You have liberty to choose what you do with your life. That's the difference.
Absolutely. In a patriarchal society, we protect men as well as women. So some of that burden on the mature men is to protect the younger men as well. And we talk about we were talking about OnlyFans and saying that it's that these women are being taken advantage of. They're selling themselves, and they're destroying their future life value for a few dollars here in the moment. And they're not the only ones suffering. There are men out there desperate for attention, who don't understand how to talk to women, don't understand how to make themselves of a level or a value in life in which women are attracted to them, and they don't have to go chasing them. If you chase women, you'll tend to be called a creep. So you don't want to be doing that. You want to be able to attract them to you. You want to be the magnet that pulls good people around you. They don't understand this. These men have been abandoned by society. And so they're desperate for even fake attention, which they get through OnlyFans. It's fake attention. They're desperate for that, and they're spending thousands of dollars on it. And a lot of people under COVID are more isolated than ever. And this is why it's part of the reason it's exploding the way it is. These young men should not be desperate for attention. They should have the attention of society's older men, guiding them, leading them, helping them figure out what they need to do to have a happy life. If that's marriage, great. If that's not marriage, what honorable position can they have in society? We used to have monasteries. We used to have places that men could go if they either weren't capable of finding a wife, or if they at the moment weren't, or they needed to upgrade themselves a bit. They could go to these places and they could learn about what it meant to be a man. They could fit in somewhere. They could be part of a group. They, at very least, could know that someone will look after them in their old age. We have nothing now. If we're treating people, and I don't say mean you and I, but society is treating people as pure resources. If you don't make children, you have no value. If you don't make money, you have no value. If you are a young man and you can't make money, and you can't get a wife and have children because you don't know how, then you have no value for society. If you die, no one cries, nobody cares. You just disappear. And we have millions of young men in this position, and almost no one is doing anything to address this, to help these young men. And these young men are spending thousands of dollars trying to get attention from internet women. They're trying online dating apps. They're trying all kinds of things, and they're not getting attention because they don't know how to behave in the world.
A lot of these men, these young guys, are also very based and red-pilled, because they don't have families. They spend a lot of time on the internet. They get exposed to a lot of these dissident and dank ideas. And that already puts them, in my view, in a whole different class than a lot of the men who are completely asleep, or, as they like to say on that side of things, woke. These young men have value to offer in their ideas and in their knowledge. So I see that with the right encouragement and training from older patriarchs, that these men could form legions, who are very, very useful to us in the future indeed. So guys, get off the OnlyFans. Do what JDK 52's done here, and come and spend your money more wisely on the Patriarch Hour, or don't spend any money at all. We're offering this advice for free. But come and surround yourself with wholesome encouragement from men who are a bit further along in the life journey than you are, who may have more success than you, and can share a bit of wisdom, because I think we're going to need you guys in the future.
And if you need some attention, direct one-on-one attention, go to my website, book a session, book a coaching session, and I can help you. I can help you get what you need. There's no sense wasting money on digital virtual women, or wasting your energy or your time on it. You're right. These are often these are good young men, and they're misseen by society because they're angry. They're naturally angry, and they should be angry. They're angry because they see what's been done to their civilization. They see that they have been denied the patriarchy to protect them that they should have had. And they're angry about it. But there are things you can do, young men. Contact James, contact myself. We will talk with you one-on-one. We'll help you. And we'll help you to get to a point where you are not powerless anymore, where you become the master of your own world, where you know how to get what you want to get out of life. And that's a big motivation for why we do what we do. A lot of people talk thinking that the Patriarch Hour is about, okay, let's get together and oppress women. The reality is, let's get together and help men be the best they can be, because that's the only way that we can have a patriarchy. And
it's for the service of women. It's for the women too. I'm becoming the best patriarch that I can be, because I know that it's better for my wife, and she knows that too. And the more we lean into our masculinity and freeing ourselves of these evil programs that have been put into us to weaken us, to make us slaves to the moment, to that hedonistic impulse, all of this we need to overcome, because we were born weak. We were born vulnerable to suggestion, but we weren't born depraved or evil, and we weren't born to be slaves to our impulses, and so we have a choice. And I believe it really begins for the individual man in the gym, or it doesn't have to be the gym. It's wherever you go. It can begin on that hill on the back of your land, or down the street, running up a hill. But getting physical and applying your will to your body to improve that and build upon that, that's the beginning of agency in practice. And it makes a really profound change psychologically and spiritually for a man when he begins to shape his body and make it into something that he would be proud of, make it into something that he imagines is possible, rather than just what he was born with, and following those impulses day by day. So yeah, I highly encourage men to get physical too.
In fact, young men, I have something for you to do right now. Turn the volume up a bit so you can still hear. Get on the floor, and while we're finishing the show, do as many push-ups as you can. And then in the chat, tell us how many push-ups you did.
Epic. Do I have to do it too?
No, we can't do the show while we're doing push-ups.
That's true, but we've got something coming, and Noah and I are working on this, and with Mike from Champions of the Light, we're working on something, and I'm excited to share it with you guys when we launch it. I'm hoping we'll get it launched at the start of the new year, if not sooner. But we will get physical with you guys in that program. We will do the exercise with you live in real time, and you'll be able to interact with us. But this is going to be a program specifically for building agency in you, and specifically for building a brotherhood of sovereign men who can do their part to get this patriarchy back up and running for the benefit of all. Absolutely.
And we don't have to wait for, this is what the last thing that I wanted to mention is that the very often, glad I'm not a man. You can still do some push-ups if you like, Margot. It's up to you. The last thing
so
that I heard.
We're all about women's choice. We're all about women's choice.
It's more of an excuse than a objection specifically. But I will see variations on the theme that, oh, the patriarchy sounds good, but first the laws have to change. But first X needs to happen. But first. Now,
let's get the family court figured out. Let's solve the family court problems, and then we can have the patriarchy again. It's backwards.
Yeah. Let's change society, and then we'll change culture, and then I'll change. I'll be the very last thing to change. I'll be the anchor that holds us all back. The reality, men, is that you have to embody. Awesome, 23 push-ups is very good.
That was fast too. Good fast set. Yeah.
We have to embody the masculinity and the world that we want to live in first. And we have to do it with all the resistance that's out there. And then that will ripple out from us. We'll recruit other men to us. Men will be pulled to us. Yeah. Oh, awesome. 4 o'clock in the morning, you already did 20? Very good.
Amazing. Yep. Great work, Rubber Dub.
And that will ripple out, and that will coalesce into a change in culture. And the change in culture will lead to a change in the law. The law is incredibly conservative. Its inertia is enormous, especially in the last few years when the laws have doubled and tripled in size. They won't be changed until culture changes, and culture will not change until men change. We need to change, and we need to be completely intolerant of anything that stops us from changing and that gets in the way of our changing of culture. And it is really the men, women tend to follow the most masculine man in the room. We have to make sure that we're the most masculine man in the room. We have to make sure that we are the most solid rock around. Governments are handing it to us on a platter right now. They're showing how weak they are, how stupid they are with all of the COVID restrictions, how foolish they are. They are breaking their bond, their pact with women. They made this deal when they gave women the vote. Vote for the biggest government program you can, and we'll make sure you're taken care of. And they kind of did that for a while. They took from men, they gave to women. At the moment, they're arresting mothers with their children in the street for not wearing masks. They're breaking into people's homes because they said something on social media that was, against the government's ridiculous restrictions. And what's happening?
Pregnant women on the beach.
Exactly. And what's happening is I believe very strongly that women will start waking up to this. I know a lot of women already have. And they'll realize that to the government, you are just cattle. Men recognize this because we see naturally far into the future, because we have to protect. Women tend to look at what's close to them, which is their job. They need to look at what's close and make sure that the close things are taken care of. But now danger is close, and so they're suffering it as well. And I think what's happened now is we have the opportunity to be the rock. The rock of government has been taken away from them. They have no solid foundation. That's why they're freaking out. That's why you see, you've probably seen that memes of women screaming into the camera online. These women are women. My favorite is the one where they had several women and then like a rhesus monkey screaming as well. the monkey fit perfectly in with that, because it was like, out of control. Actually, the monkey seemed saner than the women, but it was just being a monkey. The women were being crazy. But that craziness is because they've been detached. There's nothing they can rely on in society. Everything has been destroyed because all power was given to the government, all power from the church, all power from our social institutions. All of our ways that we looked after each other as communities, and that's mostly looked after women. We're men. We don't need anyone to look after us. Women need to be protected. Children need to be protected and cared for. We don't need it. We can get together with our friends and be fine. It's women who suffer when society collapses. And for 75 years, they've been taking all the power from these institutions that have been created and gathering it together in the government. And now it's coming back to bite them. And we have this golden opportunity to show that we are the solid rocks of society, and that we are the ones that they need to listen to get out of this mess.
But you can't fake it. You actually have to be that, and you have to become that. It's a process, and it's painful.
You have to look like you're that.
It's a necessarily painful process. It involves you embracing suffering as a man. I mean, this is actually how you become a patriarch, is you embrace suffering and you learn to love the suffering, because if you lean into the edge of your comfort zone and you push beyond your comfort zone, you get stronger and more resilient and more able to withstand. And that's how you become strong. And this is both physical and psychological and spiritual. And I think one of the great psychological tools that we can begin to work on as men, and it's certainly been helpful to me, is stop seeing yourself as a citizen of the globo homo multiculti world. Stop allowing their program to determine how you view the world. Stop even looking through the lens that they've given you, and start to step away from it, walk away from it, and say, this is the world I'm a prisoner in, but it's not my world. It's not my society. My society is yet to come, but we're building it one man at a time, one family at a time, one woman at a time. We're going to get there, and it's going to be great. But it's not there yet. So right now we're prisoners. We're aliens and prisoners in this messed up death cult that's gone global. But you can be free of it psychologically now by refusing to allow yourself to view your life and your attitudes and the world through the lens that they've forced you to have. Take their lens off, realize, take off the glasses, that they've given you, and realize that it's a lie. It's not actually how it's meant to be. It's not how it will always be. It's most certainly not how it's always been. This kind of world we live in is very, very new. It's a very new development, and it won't last. It's unsustainable. We can see that. It's collapsing right before our very eyes. So all you have to do is take the lens off before the rest of the world, and now you've got an edge. You're ahead of the curve, and you're preparing yourself for the kingdom that's coming, and you're preparing yourself to be a sovereign man in that world that's coming. And in fact, by preparing yourself, you are making that world come. And if we each do that in lockstep as men of the West, it's going to be fantastic. We're going to have a great time. And even if we don't see it come to full fruit in our lifetime, we're going to leave something better for our children that they can continue to build upon, and they'll do the same for their children. And maybe in 3, 4, or 5 generations, we will have that world again. But if you don't start now, by freeing yourself from the paradigm that they've forced upon you psychologically, it's not really the theme of this show, but I always come back to look to the highest archetype available. There's nothing higher than God, the loving Father Creator. Look to Him for guidance spiritually, and then with your brothers, get physical right now. Find the hardest, steepest hill near you and run up it as many times as you can until you puke. Do it every day.
You'll find the closer that physically stronger you get, and the closer that you bond with your brothers, the less you will care what the world thinks about you.
Mm-hmm.
And the less you care what the world thinks about you, the more powerful you are. Most of the control that we're under is purely psychological. You know, the government isn't going to arrest you for thinking the wrong thing. Yes, they'll go after you if you say the wrong thing at the moment. But if enough people think and say the wrong things, there's a limit to how far they can push it. You know, governments make a cost-benefit analysis before they enforce a law. And it is our job to make it so expensive to enforce ridiculous and unjust laws that they decide it's not worth the effort. That we want them to figure out that the juice isn't worth the squeeze when they want to squeeze us. So, you know, for men, we are going to have to be the ones that change society. We cannot rely on women to do it. The kind of women that have enough, I would say, disagreeableness to change the world are not the kind of women we probably want around most of the time, because they're generally the kind that are pushing for feminism in general, not always. We need to be the disagreeable ones in society. We need to be the ones that stand in the way. We need to be the ones that stand in the hot gates to stop the waves of propaganda and influence and one day perhaps physical attacks that we receive. It's going to have to be us men, whether it's fair or not. And if we stand strong for this, we're going to create a world that we can be happy in, and a world where we also will be able to get the benefits of the patriarchy as well. You know, as an old man, I'm looking forward to having my sons look after my affairs and take care of things while I kind of relax and play with my grandkids and enjoy my old age. You know, and I hope I'm going to still be, you know, nice and healthy and strong at that age. That's why I'm taking care of myself now. But the patriarchy gives wonderful benefits for everyone who's involved, but it will only come about if men do their job and be men.
That's it. Do your job, guys. We're here to help. You can see our contacts down there at the bottom of the screen and in the description below. If you need one-on-one help, you know, get in touch with Noah or myself. We would love to coach you and work with you. If you just want to be part of something great, join championsofthelight.com. This is the gang we're starting, the brotherhood and sisterhood. This is the family that we're beginning online, and it's going to grow and grow. And otherwise, just keep on coming back and share these videos with some people that you think need to hear this message, especially women. You know, we've got Margot here every week. She's fantastic. It's great. She's representing. My wife is currently listening through the Patriarch Hour series as she's transcribing it into what will be our first book together. Noah and I will be releasing Patriarch Hour as a book at some point in the future. So, you know, women are getting on board this train too, and we need more of them. And as Noah rightly points out, as the big daddy government that made them a lot of promises and made their mothers a lot of promises, as it begins to collapse and fail to deliver what it promised, they are going to look to us. And so you can start to bring them along to Patriarch Hour so that we can spread this important message, and that all of us can benefit from something much better that's to come, that we will build.
Thank you, James.
Pleasure as always, Noah. Great to chat with you, and always a massive download of wisdom for me hanging out with you, brother. So I look forward to the next one.
It's awesome. Look forward to next week. Take care, James.
All right. You too. This has been Patriarch Hour 19, and we'll see you all at home next time. Good night.